Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. That may no longer be a joke after last week's video. But anyway, we're going to keep moving on. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the next quick measure on our list, year-to-date total. And I realize that, it's I don't want to get these things to become too repetitive, where it's like, look how bad calculate sucks. And then, here's, it's an X aggregate table and then an X aggregator, right? It's because they can get very repetitive, right? Because gee, imagine that, that pattern just works for everything pretty much. So I don't want to get too repetitive. So today we're going to be going into a much deeper dive into time intelligence functions. Specifically, the one used in this measure is total YTD, total year to date. So we're going to get into that. But first, I wanted to just revisit real quickly some kind of odd behavior. And it's easier to show you with the measure that I did in my last video, better sales from new customers. It's easier to show the weirdness of this auto time intelligence stuff specifically. So as you can see, I'm not gonna, go into all the details. Watch the last video. I covered this pretty extensively, but obviously I have my, the measures that were created from using the quick measure. So this is Microsoft's quick measure formula for new sales from customers. And you can see here that it's using the date column and dates for doing the time intelligence aspect of it, where it's, it's hey, grab everything before this date, so that we can sum up everything for the that was previous, or find all the customers that bought previously, essentially. So it's trying to do. And then obviously then we had, this was when it was marked as a date table, even though it no longer is. Gee, imagine that, it still works. And then this one is the one that is used if it's auto time intelligence is turned on. So not marked as a date table, but you have auto time intelligence turned on. You get the date craziness of using the hierarchy for the date, which turns out to be a very bad thing. So I can prove to you that I have auto time intelligence turned on for this file. I don't normally, but now you use either one of those, right? I just summing this value, and you can see I'm not getting, previous. It's not filtering out the people that have bought previously, right? So it's not really finding the new customers. It's just adding up the sales from all the customers that bought in that month. So none of these work when I use my month, when I try to roll it up my month from my table. So think a single table data model. Neither one of those works. Versus the better sales from new customers does, right? So you can see the difference in like December, right? It's really 3,298 when this is calculating 3,553. Okay, now for the weirdness. Now it does roll up correctly if you use month from the dates, right? So in this one, I'm using date, and all of that. I'm using dates table for all of the, everything except for the value, essentially. And it does roll up correctly. So here's the sum of the value, and then here's my value for new date, which is this guy. And you can see 3,298. That agrees with better sales from new customers. But you can see here, even though this one's constructed the same way, except for it's using the date hierarchy, right? It comes out with the wrong value. So even though I'm using month from my dates column, dates table. So why is that? Well, it's kind of interesting, actually. And it has to do with that date hierarchy. So if I just create a measure where I say min dates.date, dates, date.date, God, that's so annoying to say. You can see here, it comes back with January 1st for everything, regardless of the month. So it's like it loses the filter on that auto time intelligence table, right? And that's why it doesn't work. Versus min date 2, if I don't use that stupid date hierarchy from auto time intelligence, and I just use min dates date, I come back with the right values, which is why this one works. Because this one doesn't use the date hierarchy. This one does use the date hierarchy. And the interesting thing about this, and I'll wrap this piece of it up, if I would just go in here and just remove the .date piece of all the references to date, it would work. It would even work if I turned auto time intelligence off, right? You know, so why do they make you jump through all those hoops creating the measures and tell you that you must and insist that you have the thing marked as a date table or auto time intelligence turned on, when once you create the measure, you can go turn it off and it still works. As long as you're obviously you get rid of these things right here, right? Got to get rid of that. And then this actually works because essentially it's the same as this one over here. All right, so that is, I want to show you that because it also comes into play. You get similar kinds of results with year-to-date total. So year-to-date total, you know, obviously I have my values table. You know, this is my fact table. This is my dimension table. My dates, they're connected on date. Got my auto time intelligence turned on. Blah blah blah. You guys seen that a million times if you're watching this channel. And then so let's go in. So to create the quick measure, you come in here, come down here to year-to-date total. You select your base value, which in this case is value. And then from our date, now if I try to use, again, I try to use this date, which auto time intelligence doesn't recognize for some reason, doesn't work. Doesn't even let me create the measure because time intelligence isn't turned on and this is not marked as a date table. So, but if I drag date in with auto time intelligence turned on, it accepts it. It's all happy, even though it doesn't matter ultimately. But so I created two versions of this, kind of like in the last video. I created once where I marked this as a date table, created the quick measure, then I unmarked it as a date table, turned on auto time intelligence, and I drug it in here and created that version, right? So now I'll show you the different versions that it created. All right. So here's the version it created when I had it marked as a date table. Total YTD, sum the value, dates in date, dates date, right? Easy peasy. So now here's the version. It starts yelling at you if it's filtered and blah, blah, blah. And then sort of the same thing. It's basically the same thing. Total YTD, sum, and then it uses dates.date. All well and good. And it is kind of crazy that for some reason this it doesn't auto recognize this as a date column, even though, I'll show you, model, it's a date, right? And it's a calculated column or calculated table. It's using union, so it's a little more complex, but this is also a calculated column, calculated table. It's using calendar and it's using an add columns, so it's not like it's trivial, just a trivial calendar function. You know, this is also using calendar. It is unioning them together, but for whatever reason, auto time intelligence fails to recognize this. And anyway, more weirdness and strangeness with auto time intelligence. Okay, so as you might expect, in a single table data model where I'm just using everything from table. So I'm getting my month from my table. That's this guy, right? Month's coming from table, and I've got my two measures that I just showed you. It doesn't work. That is not a year-to-date total, right? So now if you use month from the dates table, right there. So there's the value, right? That's just the sum of the value. Y-to-date value YTD does work, right? You can see, right? That's an actual year-to-date total. And as I was showing you, but YTD2, which uses that stupid date.date syntax, it doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. Now, this is going to be the repetitive part, and then we'll jump into the time intelligence stuff. But you can probably, if you've been watching any of these videos, you probably know what the answer. You know what the answer is going to be. Create a date table or create a table var and some X across it. It's very simple. There's nothing to get too excited about here. Well, if I can actually get my mouse cursor to work. Here we go. Right. So what I'm doing here, right, and I wrote this out for a specific reason, but better YTD. Okay, I get my max date in context, right? So it's going to get the end of the month if I'm in a month context. And then I'm going to get my year. So because I only want year to date, right? So I need to know what my year is in context. And so then I'm just going to filter the entire table so that I break out of the month context. I get the entire table. And I'm going to say date is less than or equal to my date my date variable. And I want my year to equal my year variable, correct? So now I can just sum X across it and poof, you're done. And it works. Look at that. Whee! All right, so it also works. And it's the same measure. Look, it's the same measure. It works when using month. So it doesn't matter if I use my month for my table or month for my dates, it still functions properly, which I think is huge, especially for beginners. Anyway. I'm gonna try not to get onto a soapbox rant. Now, the neat thing about this, right, is, well, that's great. It's calendar year. Like it's assuming calendar year. What if you have a fiscal year, right? So what I did here, just to keep this simple, is I create a column in my dates table and in my table where it's fiscal year if month sort is less than 7. So if it's January through June, then it's the previous year. Otherwise, it's the current year. And I did the same thing in the dates table. I created the exact same fiscal year column there. So what is the change that we need to make for this to turn it into a fiscal year? Maybe it'll do fiscal year instead of calendar year. Well, it's actually incredibly simple. All I do is replace that year variable with a FY variable where I grab the max in the fiscal year column. And then I change my filter. Instead of saying year equals underscore year, I say fiscal year equals fiscal year. And that's the only change. It's the only difference. And now I've switched it from calendar year to fiscal year, right? Super simple. Same exact pattern, which I think is huge. When you find a single pattern that basically you can follow kind of prescriptively, and it works and it works again and it works again and it works every time. I mean, I think it's a huge time savings, one. Right? And it's far easier. You just have to learn one thing in one way of doing it, and it's going to work for everything that you want to do in DAX. And I think that is huge for beginners, because I myself struggled with DAX and just how quirky it was when I was trying to use calculator, and it would work, one time it would work, and then I would do something a little different, and then it wouldn't work. I mean, it's just super frustrating, right? And it could be as simple as I pulled the wrong column into my visual. Right? And then calculate doesn't work for whatever reason. It just throws up all over itself. Okay, so we're going to dig in deeper on this. So you saw how easy it is with this, right? Just make one little change, instead of year, use fiscal year, and you're done. Is it so simple with total YTD? Well, believe it or not, total year to date does have there's 2 optional parameters. So there's a total of 4 possible parameters for YTD, and it's actually right in the documentation that we will look at. So here we go. So we have an expression that returns a scalar value, our dates. Our filter is optional, so it's an optional parameter. We don't need it necessarily. And then year and date is also optional. And it's basically a string that you can put like 6/30 for June 30th type of stuff. The default's December 31. And it's got the same remarks and all that stuff. But this is what so we can use this, even though total YTD, like every other time intelligence function, assumes calendar Gregorian date, your Gregorian calendar, right? Standard calendar. You can use it for fiscal if you have a fiscal calendar. However, is it so easy? Is it as easy as what you saw with the better YTD? Well, let's take a look. So I've got a couple measures here, and you can already see there's problems. So I've got 7 different versions of this, because the documentation is really pretty poor. And that's another thing I complain. I have this article out there called "To Bleep with Time Intelligence," right? And it goes through and provides alternative functions for all the time alternative DAX for all the time intelligence functions. And it just compares the time intelligence functions to the 5th horseman of the apocalypse, but we won't go into all that sort of stuff. All right, so you're thinking, okay, well, Mr. Greg, you're so smart. You just filter down to a table. Well, I can do the same thing with total YTD, right? I can just I'll just filter it down. I'm having problems with my mouse today. Okay, I'll just filter it down, my dates table, and I'll just plug that into my total YTD, and it'll work. Nope. Guess what? That second parameter has to refer to an actual column in your data model. Can't be a table expression or a table variable. Doesn't work. It gives you a nice, really helpful error message, at least, though. Cannot find table. So anyway, so no, it's not nearly that easy. So you can't just do the same thing that I did, which I create a fiscal year variable and then filter down to a fiscal year by fiscal year equal to that variable. Nope, not that simple. All right, so strike one. All right, well, let's go on. Well, we know that there's a fourth, that we have two optional. You read that optional, right? In both those second ones, and those those the four parameters and the last two are optional. Not so much. So it's like, oh, I could just specify when my end of year is and it'll work. No, because like in a lot of other DAX measures, when you have optional parameters, and you can, like in rank X, for example, you can just do comma comma on that like third parameter that nobody ever uses, right? And then you want to be able to get to that fourth parameter where you can specify ascending or descending, and you just skip over it, right? You just, okay, not going to provide a value for it. So you might think you could do the same thing in TOTALYTD. Not so much. Not so much. Argument 3 in TOTALYTD function is required, even though it said it was optional. But apparently, once you use the optional fourth parameter, it requires the optional third parameter. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff you can't make up, man. All right, so strike 2. Third attempt. Okay, so I don't want to filter anything in my those dates column, that dates column that's coming back. So I'll just throw the table name in there, as that filter option, just dates, and then I'll specify. Then I can get past that. Now I have a fourth parameter. So let's see how that turns out. At least we didn't get a little the world's on fire. Nope, doesn't work. You can see it right there. Doesn't work. Too bad, so sad, strike 3. Okay, so, how are we going to solve this? Let's move on to the next one. Hey, using all solves all problems in DAX, so we'll just throw an all around it, and then our 630, and then see if that works. Yay, it actually works. So after 3 strikes, you get to the fourth one, and randomly you throw an all around the table for no apparent reason, and poof, it works. This stuff's so easy, right? That's so intuitive that that is what solves it. And the documentation is really not any help. Okay, so we finally have 1, 2, 3. We've got a working one in 3. Now the other route to go down is that third parameter, that filter. Can we get this to work with using that filter parameter and not specifying an end of year essentially? So let's take a look at that one. So first attempt might be something like, hey, I'll get my fiscal year, my max of the fiscal year, and it's a filter clause, right? So I'll use filter. I'll filter the dates that are coming back, and with I'll specify the FY column equal to that my variable, and easy peasy. Nope, doesn't work. Doesn't work. Okay, all right. Well, we'll all solve the last one, right? So let's just throw an all around that dates, and then fiscal year equal fiscal year, and maybe that works. And it does. All the all function solves all of your DAX problems. I'll have to make a video on it, on how all solves everything. And there is another form of this one that works actually. So you could actually do it this way as well, where you just do dates and then the column equals fiscal year. So it's this. You would think that it's the same thing as that filter clause, but it's not. I love this stuff. Yeah, so yeah, this one also works, right? So, amazingly. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 3 of them working. We're almost to 50%. And that's why I just, yes, you can use the time intelligence functions for fiscal, when you have fiscal calendars and things like that. But what a pain. What an absolute pain. And just one little thing, having all around it or not having all around it, using a filter clause versus just not using that filter, right? It's like, I don't know, man. I mean, for new users, again, how they, trying to figure this stuff out, you're going to, you get like less than a 50% success ratio, depending on what you put as for those other optional parameters, even though they're required in some instances, right? Versus, between this, and this. I mean, how easy is that? And that's how you can flip between fiscal year or calendar year. You don't have to go through all this nonsense. So time intelligence functions in DAX are bad. Don't use them. I've been preaching this for a long time. Like I said, you can go out and find. I'll put a link in the video. description to bleep with time intelligence. I'm not a fan of time intelligence functions. I think they it's just they are useless, and I don't like them. So I will catch you all next time.